Have you ever thought about what happens to a major metropolis when everyone finally goes to sleep? The streets empty out, the neon lights dim, and the frantic energy of the day completely stops. But the city isn't actually dead. That exact moment of silence is when the most crucial work begins. The street sweepers arrive, the garbage trucks roll out, and the sanitation crews work through the night. Without them, the city would literally choke on its own waste within a matter of days.
It is a brilliant analogy, and it perfectly mirrors the most complex structure in the known universe, the human brain. For a very long time, we fundamentally misunderstood what happens when we close our eyes. We thought the brain just powered down, like a computer going into standby mode, but the reality is far more extraordinary.
Because the brain is generating its own kind of garbage all day long, right?
A massive amount of it. The brain is an absolute energy hog. It only accounts for about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy. And that extreme metabolic intensity comes with a cost. Every time you think, every time you process an emotion, solve a problem, or even just look at a screen, your brain cells are creating biological byproducts.
So, the simple act of living and being awake leaves behind a physical residue in the brain.
Exactly. We are talking about metabolic debris, oxidative byproducts, damaged proteins, and inflammatory molecules. It is cellular exhaust. And here is the critical issue. Unlike the rest of your body, the brain is incredibly sensitive to this debris. It cannot tolerate garbage accumulation. If those toxic byproducts just sit there, you start experiencing what we casually call brain fog. You get fatigued, your memory slips, and your cognitive clarity completely plummets.
Which leads to the ultimate mystery. The rest of the body has the lymphatic system to clear out waste, right? It's like the body's internal plumbing. But the brain is locked away inside the skull behind the blood-brain barrier. So for decades, how the brain actually got rid of its trash was a massive blind spot in science.
It was one of the greatest puzzles in neuroscience. We knew the brain had to be clearing this waste somehow, otherwise we wouldn't survive. But we couldn't find the mechanism. It wasn't until relatively recently that researchers discovered something totally hidden, a completely separate plumbing network inside the brain called the glymphatic system.
The glymphatic system, it sounds like a secret underground river.
That is essentially what it is. It is a highly specialized fluid network that manages the movement of cerebrospinal fluid through microscopic channels surrounding the brain tissue. This fluid exchange is what physically washes away the metabolic waste, the damaged proteins, and the cellular debris.
But this system doesn't just run all the time, does it?
No, and that is the most fascinating part. The glymphatic system operates on a very specific schedule. It is relatively quiet while we are awake, but the moment we fall into deep, slow-wave sleep, this system kicks into absolute overdrive. It is quite literally a nighttime rinse cycle for the brain.
So when we sleep, we are physically washing our brains. That is incredible. But I want to dig into the mechanics of this because I read something about what happens to the actual brain cells during this process, and I almost couldn't believe it. Do our neurons actually change shape?
They do. This is one of the most astonishing findings in modern sleep science. When you enter deep sleep, your brain cells, the neurons themselves, appear to physically shrink in volume.
Wait, they shrink? Like buildings in a city contracting to make the streets wider?
That is a perfect way to visualize it. By slightly reducing their volume, the neurons create significantly more space between themselves. This expanded extracellular space allows the cerebrospinal fluid to rush through the brain tissue with much less resistance. The fluid circulates rapidly, flushing out the accumulated waste from the day.
That is mind-blowing. The brain literally reorganizes its physical architecture every single night just to facilitate this cleaning process. It alters its own structure to take out the trash.
Exactly. The sleeping brain becomes physically optimized for waste clearance. The slow-wave electrical oscillations of deep sleep actually help synchronize and drive this fluid movement. It is a highly choreographed, intensely active biological event.
Which completely destroys the old idea that sleep is just a passive state of rest. But I want to talk about the stakes here, because we aren't just talking about waking up feeling a little groggy. What exactly is in this microscopic trash?
That is where this research moves, from fascinating to deeply critical for our long-term health. Among the debris being washed away are specific proteins, most notably beta amyloid and tau.
Those names carry a lot of weight in the medical world.
They do, because the abnormal accumulation of those exact proteins is heavily associated with severe neurodegenerative processes, including Alzheimer's disease. In a healthy brain getting proper deep sleep, the glymphatic system sweeps these proteins away before they can form toxic plaques.
But if you disrupt that sleep,
the clearance process is severely impaired. The fluid doesn't flow efficiently, the debris stays. And over time, night after night, year after year, those toxic proteins begin to accumulate. This is why there is enormous interest right now in sleep as a primary neuroprotective mechanism.
it frames poor sleep not just as a bad habit, but as a slow compounding neurological debt. You are literally leaving toxic waste sitting in the most delicate machine on Earth.
Precisely, and it is a deeply important area of investigation, especially when you look at how we live today.
Right, let's talk about modern life, because it feels like modern civilization is aggressively designed to destroy deep sleep. We have blue light from screens burning into our eyes until midnight, chronic stress, doom scrolling, late night eating. We are constantly wired.
Unfortunately, yes. We have created an environment that is entirely hostile to our own biology. Things like artificial light exposure, alcohol, and elevated stress hormones fragment our sleep architecture.
So you might be in bed for 8 hours, completely unconscious, but the garbage trucks never actually arrive.
Exactly. You are asleep, but your nervous system is struggling to enter those optimal recovery states. The slow-wave deep sleep is cut short or constantly interrupted. As a result, modern humans are often sleeping without actually achieving restorative neurological recovery.
That is a terrifying thought. You spend a third of your life unconscious, but your brain is still failing to recover. Why is it so hard to get into that state? Does the rest of the body have to cooperate?
It absolutely does. The glymphatic system doesn't operate in a vacuum. It functions within a broader physiological recovery environment. For the brain to initiate this massive fluid flush, the body has to shift into a state of parasympathetic dominance.
The rest and digest mode, as opposed to fight or flight.
Correct. Your heart rate needs to slow down. Your breathing needs to become deep and rhythmic. Your heart rate variability, or HRV, needs to stabilize and improve. Systemic inflammation has to decrease. Only when the autonomic nervous system signals that the environment is safe and calm does the brain fully commit to this deep cleaning process.
So deep sleep is really a synchronization of multiple repair systems happening all at once. The heart, the lungs, the nervous system, and the brain all have to play in perfect harmony.
Beautifully stated. The sleeping body becomes a highly restorative ecosystem, and this is why sleep is beginning to look less like a period of inactivity and more like the most demanding maintenance shift of the day.
It really flips our cultural obsession with productivity completely upside down. We have this hustle culture that treats sleep as a weakness or an annoying biological tax we have to pay. But in reality, rest is productive biology.
It is incredibly productive. While you are asleep, the brain is performing memory consolidation, locking in what you learned that day. It is recalibrating synapses, regulating hormones, coordinating the immune system, and executing this massive metabolic cleanup. The body conducts extraordinary biological work during unconsciousness. The sleeping brain is highly active, it is just differently active.
So, looking forward, how does this new understanding change the future of health and medicine? Because it feels like a paradigm shift.
It is a massive shift. Future health systems are going to increasingly prioritize deep sleep quality as a core metric for longevity. We are already seeing the beginning of this with advanced wearables.
Right, everyone has a smart ring or a watch now.
But the focus is changing. It is no longer just about counting how many hours you are in bed. It is about AI analyzing your specific sleep stages, tracking your HRV, monitoring respiratory patterns and temperature fluctuations continuously. The future of brain health is going to focus heavily on protecting and optimizing our restorative sleep architecture.
Because if wearables just give us raw data, it doesn't mean much. The real value is in interpreting that data to ensure we are actually clearing out the biological waste. Cognitive resilience literally begins with nightly neural maintenance.
Very likely. We have to understand that sleep is not an interruption to life, It is arguably one of the most biologically essential activities humans perform. The brain survives through restoration, and that restoration can only truly begin in darkness.
It is a profound realization. Every single night, as your consciousness fades and the world goes quiet, your brain begins cleaning itself. Quietly, relentlessly. It is washing away the damage of the day, protecting your memory, preserving your clarity, and in a very real sense, maintaining your identity itself.
It is an elegant, beautiful system. We just have to respect it enough to let it do its job.
A perfect thought to end on. The next time you close your eyes, just remember the immense unseen work happening beneath the surface. The night shift is clocking in.